Today I'm just going to give you two quick, honest lessons that I've heard and learned from my personal experiences as an entrepreneur and just in life. So, what I'll do is I'll give you the life lesson, I'll give you the story behind that lesson, and then I'll convert it into an entrepreneurial lesson. And I think that starting off as an entrepreneur doesn't matter what stage you are at, if you have come up with an idea, if you don't know about entrepreneurship, whatever it is, this is just two stories that I want to tell you, which will give you the biggest pitfalls and the biggest starting points to becoming an entrepreneur. So, two honest lessons from my side, two stories, and I hope that this helps you start your entrepreneurial journey, which is a long road ahead, but this is a great starting point, and you can learn from what mistakes I made. So, lesson number one, always listen to the tingles. Now, I know tingles is a funny word, and I know that you had expected something entrepreneurial lingo to be on the first slide, like a pitch deck, revenue model, and how to identify unicorn ideas. But we are going to start with tingles. And before I explain what the word tingles means, as promised, let me give you the story behind it. So, this is most of you, and it was definitely me, where Indian parents say, do your doctor or engineering profession first and then go on to decide what you're passionate about and then follow your dreams to sort of lay out the foundation and safety net that they think they're laying out for us before we pursue our entrepreneurial dreams or our true calling. So I did my time. I became a mechanical engineering student from Pune University, and I graduated as a mechanical engineer and immediately joined Tata Elxsi, which was an entry-level design firm. And I was a very junior engineer then, which meant that I had to work night shifts. And I used to come home sometimes at around 1 a.m. in the night, 2 a.m. in the night. And I always used to ride my motorcycle. And every time I came back home late at night, in the first couple of months, I used to see something in the middle of the road. And I just used to pray, please don't let this be what I think it is. But it almost always was what I thought it was, which was a dead dog in the middle of the road that was run over by a car, a speeding car. So I thought that this was an isolated incident. This is what happens, right? Cars speed, there are no street lights, and dogs come in the middle of the road and they get run over. That's the order of life, and that's just how it is. But as more months went by, 4 to 6 months went by, I realized that this is happening every month, and the number of occurrences, if not increasing, are definitely remaining at the same level, which meant that there was a pattern there and there was a problem there. And somehow this situation was just calling out to me to do something about it, to find out more about it. So I set out to do just that. I set out to talk to almost 80 to 100 people who have been in close encounters or in actual accidents where they had to run over dogs or they missed at the last minute. And all of them obviously had the same thing to say, which you have guessed by now, which is that they don't see the dogs at night. But a new input that they gave me was they don't see the dogs early enough. They needed to see the dogs from a considerable distance to make sure that they can take the time to take a conscious decision to slow down or change lanes or completely stop so as to save the dog's life and their own lives. So that was the problem, and which was to make dogs visible from a distance. And because I was a design engineer in an automotive firm, I had access to some retroreflective materials such as this. And we used those to create collars for dogs. And because most of our group was students, I was just starting to earn, and we didn't have a lot of funds to use the base material, which is something cheap and available easily. We decided to use denim pants and jeans, as you call them, in different households, which all of us have in our cupboard, and we think we're going to fit into at some point in the future, but we never will. So we collected a lot of those denims, we cut them up as base material, and we made 500 collars in the city of Pune. And we collared 500 dogs, and then we waited. In the next 24 or 48 hours, we started getting all these anonymous comments that, oh, I was speeding on XYZ road and I saw something shiny in the middle of the road and I had to slow down, and turns out it was a dog. Or that I was taking a turn on a blind curve and I was startled by something shiny in the distance. So I stopped and it was a dog. And all these anonymous comments started validating what we had set out to do and the fact that this solution was working. And pretty soon, as you can see, it blew up. Media houses picked it up. It was getting featured everywhere because, let's be honest, a bunch of students cutting up denim pants, making collars, and making dogs shiny in the night was pretty interesting to some people. And soon enough, Mr. Ratan Tata, who is an animal activist himself, this caught his attention, and he became the primary investor in what we call this motorballs. But the moral of the story here is not how amazing everything turned out to be. The moral of the story is again tied to the word tingles. Tingles is that feeling that I was getting every night when I was passing this circumstance and I could feel the situation calling out to me, asking me to do something, to go out of my way, out of my daily life, and do something about this particular situation. That strong calling, that strong pull, that strong need for attention from that circumstance was what I would call a tingle. Now you might say, Shantanu, how great and how lucky to have found you found that tingle, it converted into motor pause. That's just amazing. It turned out for you, but we don't have tingles. That's just not true. Every single person watching this has tingles day in and day out. And every single one of you chooses to ignore it. And I'm going to tell you why you ignore it. Because it doesn't meet your short-term goals. It doesn't meet your career background. It doesn't meet your educational background. It doesn't meet what you're going to do in the next 2-3 months, what interview you're going to give, or that one track trajectory that you've mapped out for yourself, which we so often do, even as Indian students, to get from point A to point B. Everything outside of that is not of interest to us. That is how you miss out on these tingles, which are something that are calling for attention. But as promised, the entrepreneur lesson here is the best ideas are in the biggest problems. The number one email that we get in Mr. Tata's office is, Mr. Tata, I have the entrepreneurial spirit, but how do I come up with that one magical problem which will earn millions or will convert into a unicorn? Well, the solution to that is not to wait for a chance of luck, but the solution to that is to actively remind your brain to be constantly receptive to the things people are complaining about you. What are they complaining about? What are they cribbing about? What are they constantly being inconvenienced by? Those are the things that are causing them so much trouble that they will pay money to get solved. And those are the problems you need to be constantly receptive to listening. And because of our one track lives, we are completely averse to everyone else's problems and we tune those off. But these problems that people are constantly bringing up are the potential startup ideas. This is where you get these startup ideas. Be it in daily life, be it at your workplace, be it a bad coffee machine. For example, I went to Starbucks last week and I realized that every time I come here, people in the queue are complaining about how much time it takes, despite all the counters in the front being empty. So if people are complaining about that day in and day out, probably Starbucks can pay you for a solution to solve this issue. This is just an example, but I agree that now that you have heard about this from me, you will do this for 2-3 days, you'll start being receptive, but like every other human being, you'll forget about this session, you'll forget about what I said. So I would recommend this particular exercise to you. Put down 3 to 4 problems that you observe in daily life that people are complaining about, cribbing about, or that you observe on an Excel sheet. And at the end of the month, that should give you about 100 problems on an Excel sheet in front of you. And you can try and solve them. And 100 of these 100 problems that you put down can be absolutely useless, and that's fine. But at the end of 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, you will have 300, 600, 900 problems on an Excel sheet in front of you. And you can't tell me that there's not 10 to 15 problems in there which can be converted into great startup ideas. So follow this exercise, train your mind into constantly being receptive to the situations around you, being receptive to what people are complaining about. And that's how you come up with the startup idea. All the startups that you idolize and respect all started in this place, which is a great problem to solve. For example, Amazon was listening to the customer who was complaining constantly about, I don't want to leave my house to shop. I want to be able to get stuff here without leaving the house. Google was trying to solve the problem that you want information at the snap of a wrist and you want it in that very instant without having to refer to a million books or making assumptions. All these big, large conglomerates started with a problem. They didn't come upon a stroke of luck. They were receptive to something people were constantly complaining about. They took that, gave it a solution, and created this startup. Lesson number 2, and the most crucial lesson in your entire entrepreneurial journey, is going to be this: go off-road, but first research. So after my engineering, I decided to become an automotive designer. I wanted to be that automotive designer who designs these sexy Lamborghinis and Ferraris and was known all across the world as the guy who designs these beautiful, expensive cars. And I went to my father and I said, I want to become an automotive designer. And he said, no. And I said, why? And he said, what do you even know about becoming an automotive designer? And I gave him very superficial answers, that there's this course and that course and this program. And he wasn't satisfied. He said, if you want to become an automotive designer, come back to me with a big fat file of why you want to be one, how you can be one, and why you think you have something to contribute to this field. So I set out on my journey. I researched a lot. And the more I started speaking to students and people who have been in this field, I realized how difficult it is to be an automotive designer. It is extremely difficult, and especially from India, and you might just end up designing the door of a car that nobody ever heard about. On my final day, when I was supposed to decide, I went to IIT Bombay, where they have an industrial design center. And I spoke to the graduating students there, and that one person told me there is a 1 to 3% chance you will make it as a successful automotive designer from here in India. And I was not okay with that statistic. And you know what? There is someone out there who's okay with that statistic who would have said, yes, 1 to 3%, I don't care. I will be in that small segment. I will become that automotive designer. But I wasn't that person. And at that moment, I realized why my father made me do this. It was basically to make me differentiate between infatuation and love for automotive design. And turns out I was infatuated. I repeated the same process for my MBA. I got good statistics, good answers. I realized I talked to a lot of people in the MBA. That is the whole point of the story. I talked to a lot of people and they gave me some very real on the ground facts, which I was assuming to be something else. And I decided I liked the answers and I went for my MBA. But the most important entrepreneurial lesson here is it's not the best idea because you said so. The only single most absolute living thing on planet Earth who can tell you that your idea is amazing and that it will work, the only authority on Earth, is the customer who is going to use your product or service, and nobody else. Nobody gets to tell you that it's a great idea, not industry experts, not Google research reports. And the last person who should be telling you that it's a great idea is you. When we come up with the idea, get so married to it that our ego refuses to believe anything else. I like pineapple on pizza, but I can't go out and say that everyone has to like pineapple on pizza because I find it so tasty. In fact, there's a whole community out there who would stone me to death if they found out I like pineapple on pizza. That is how much they hate it. But I would never know about that if I'd never stepped out and asked them. Instead, I chose to assume that because I like it so much, everyone has to like it. It is not the best idea because you said so. I'll give you another example. You can design the world's best bottle opener. It can have aluminum finish, it can have Bluetooth, it can have an LED light, but it's just not getting sold. Why? Because when you go out and talk to the customer, they're telling you that the 5 rupee, 10 rupee bottle opener that we bought at the general store is still opening bottles in our house. We don't really need a bottle opener, which brings me to the most important reason, the number one reason, according to Financial Times, because of which startups across the world fail, is the lack of market need. Number 3 reason is not having a good co-founding team. Number 2 reason is not having enough funds. But number 1 reason for startups to fail across the globe is that there is no market need for whatever you created. And this is the reason why, because you think that it's a great idea and you assume that everyone else also thinks it's a great idea. Fortunately for this big red flag, there's a very easy solution and an easy approach. And this is called get out of the building approach. And it is exactly what it sounds like. You get out of the building and you talk to a minimum of 100 people, and you run your idea by them. There will be one of the outcomes. majority of them will say, what an amazing idea. I've been looking for a solution to my problem. And if you came out with this, I would buy it. Excellent. You just got validation, close your eyes and go to the next stage. The second outcome, the most important outcome, is people telling you, this is not something we want, or this is not going to work, or this is not important to me. And this will be a crucial moment for you as an entrepreneur, because at this moment, you need to keep your ego aside, accept the fact that the people who were supposed to pay you money for coming up with this idea are telling you themselves that they don't want this and move on to something else. If you are a true entrepreneur, you will find another problem to solve, apply your spirit, and create a startup. But you should not ever say that the customer doesn't know what they want. Let me, anyways, go ahead with it and convince the customer that they need this. No. And the third outcome is the customer telling you, majority of the customers telling you, why don't you make this XYZ change in your product and I will buy it. If majority of them tell you the same change, then it's called a pivot, a change of direction. You incorporate that with eyes closed, because these are the people who are going to give you money, and you go to the next stage. That is how you avoid a lot of savings on time, effort, and money, because you're going to put your life on the line and put in so much effort and money. Don't you want to know if it's going to work or not? And this is a no cost solution to go out there and talk to people and find out if it's going to work or not. Don't make those assumptions. Don't get married to the ideas. And definitely don't be this person. You have to take criticism in entrepreneurship. If you imagine your idea as this big, rough rock in the beginning, and you cling on to it and you say, nobody attack it, nobody criticize it, I will take it to the end. At the end, it's still going to be a big, rough rock. But if you let people attack it at every stage, criticize it, chisel away at it, then in the end, it will be resembling some form of what you need it to be, which is a good, refined sculpture. And in the end, customers are people, and people are complicated. They have emotions, they have moods, they have complex problems within them that you cannot capture in a Google research report with your laptop in front of you in between four walls. It will only be when you go out and have these face-to-face conversations, when you can observe what they're saying, how they're saying it, that invaluable data that you collect, that is going to be the true crux of whether or not your idea will be successful, because you're listening to what the person who's supposed to pay you is saying.